Thank you so much for being here with us. We would like to welcome you to this event that's in collaboration with Queen's University and Talal Abu-Ghazaleh University College for Innovation. Talal Abu-Ghazaleh University College for Innovation, it was established last year, January of 2018. It is a university college that specialized in business and IT, and it focuses on innovation. Talal Abu-Ghazaleh University College is different from any other colleges in Jordan and in the Arab world. It is in itself a startup. It is in itself an innovative university, but it fosters innovation and encourages students to be innovators themselves. Talal Abu-Ghazaleh University College wishes, and its vision is to graduate students that are job creators, students that are leaders, students that are innovators. We don't want our students to seek for jobs after graduation. We want our students to create jobs for other people. We want our students to be the leaders for change in the coming years and the so changing world, or the worlds of artificial intelligence, the worlds of cybersecurity, and we want our students to be the leaders in this era. Talal Abu-Ghazaleh University College is providing students with the environment, the right environment to be innovators. Is doing so by the curriculum it offers, by the extracurriculum activities that actually we're collaborating with the Queen's University, one of these extracurriculum activities to encourage students to be innovators, to encourage students to be aware of their surrounding environment, and to encourage students to be good citizens. It is my great pleasure to start this collaboration with the Queen's University by starting this workshop, but this is the first step toward a wider and larger collaborations and wider projects in the years to come. Currently, Talal Abu-Ghazaleh University College offers undergraduate and postgraduate programs. It offers Master in Business Administration, and currently the registration is open for this program. It will offer bachelor programs in the next academic year that starts on October 14th of this year. These programs in Bachelor in Business Administration and Bachelor in Computer Science. But our programs will be different than any other bachelors in the same area, as we're trying to provide a holistic approach to education, a different approach to education, an approach that encourages students to be innovators and entrepreneurs. I want to thank you again for being here, and I would like you to welcome His Excellency Dr. Talal Abu-Ghazaleh to speak a little bit about his leadership experience and about his leadership style. Your Excellency.
Before I go to the podium, thank you very much.
Teamwork. You always say you are a student. You're still a student, aren't you?
This student standing in front of you is a proud student. Today, I am a student, and tomorrow, if I live until tomorrow, I will be a student. Learning is a process that never stops. An Arabi who thinks that he graduated or he has become knowledgeable is that person. A living person is a person who learns every day. A person who doesn't learn every day is dead. I spent my life learning, and my life journey has been a process of learning. Now the world is moving from teaching to learning. It's a bit too late. because as a refugee in 1948, I decided I want to learn. And I decided I want to learn in spite of every problem, in spite of the lack of financial, available schooling, transport, in spite of everything. I solved all the problem through a process of learning. I learned, and I was 10 years old, that I can go to school, to a school which is 20 kilometers far away, walking. That's learning. I learned that it was a great pleasure to walk for 2 hours to go to school and 2 hours to come back. That was a learning process. And I was very proud that I could make that journey on foot. I learned that the school doesn't give me everything I need. So I learned also that knowledge is the greatest place for learning. A school and a university has a very limited program and agenda for you to learn. I learned that I can learn and teach myself without having great teachers like Dr. Muntaha. I didn't need a Dr. Muntaha to teach me. When I was at a school that didn't teach any English language, this person studied in his high school at a school that taught everything in Arabic. There was no English language course. Yet, when I applied to the American University of Beirut, AUB, and it's in my certificate on the website and in my office hang, it says I passed English 101 by exemption. I didn't take the course, English 101, and I didn't take the course, Arabic 101. I was exempted from going to that class because my standard was higher than the class English 101. Why? Because I learned that there is a learning process called being a translator. And I learned that when you need money, you need to do something to earn money. And I decided while I'm a student to learn how to excel in my command of the English language. So I worked as a translator. How? I bought all the dictionaries available, and I used to spend the night putting sentences together, testing them the next day, and finally I learned the process of translating. I taught myself. I had nobody to teach me to translate. Now we are the largest translation firm in the world, by the way. We are the largest intellectual property company in the world. We are the largest capacity building organization in the world, etc. It all started from the process of realizing that learning is something you decide and nobody gives to you, and nobody can deprive you from. So having had the privilege of being a translator of books that were published by other names, the book would be published by the name of a known author, because if it wasn't my name, nobody would buy it. The name Talal Abu-Ghazaleh did not mean anything at that time. I had to, and this is legal and proper, because under intellectual property and our master on intellectual property, Talal Abu-Ghazaleh, would tell you that there is a rule in intellectual property in copyright, what is called work for hire. If I get paid for anything, my product is owned by the payer. So if I am paid to translate a book, I don't own the translation. The translation is owned by the party who paid for the cost. So I learned that translation was a great source of income. And I became a translator. I became wealthy as a translator. And by translating, I learned Arabic too. And that's why I was exempted also from Arabic 101 at the American University of Beirut, which is, as is known, is one of the top 2 schools in Lebanon and is an accredited university in the world. But that also led me to learn how the beauty of the English language. So I became a scholar on Shakespeare. Shakespeare is my love, my first love, even before I loved my wife. My first love was Mr. Shakespeare. And I became an expert on Shakespeare. And when I went to university, I wanted to join and apply for the School of English Literature. It's arts and science, and to specialize in English literature. Fortunately or unfortunately, that school was not open for registration, so I had to register for anything. So one of my friends said, let's register for business administration. But that didn't stop me from exercising my love affair with Shakespeare. And I was teaching Shakespeare at schools in Lebanon as a student to my same class. When I was in high school, I was teaching students in other university schools, high schools, on Shakespeare. And I'm still in love with Shakespeare. And I realized that you can have that love relationship whatever you study and whatever you work. So it was a great experience for me that I needed the money and that I had to work for the money, work to earn the money. It's all learning. Now I learned that it's very difficult to find a job. At my time, and still unfortunately, and I want to tell leading schools in the world, including Queen's, that I'm preparing a court case against universities and schools globally. If I can have a court case, because we are not being fair to our students. The world doesn't need university graduates. The world needs inventors. University graduates are a problem today. The problem is how to find jobs for university graduates. Instead of graduation being a blessing, graduation now is a burden on the governments. And we read it in Jordan that we need to try to find jobs for the many graduates. 50% of some of the graduates in certain fields are jobless. I received the Association of Doctorate Holders in Jordan, and they asked me to be their honorary chair. And after talking, one lady came to me and said, I have a PhD degree in education 15 years ago, and I'm still looking for a job. 15 years from a leading university, looking for a job. Because the world doesn't need graduates. The world needs inventors. It's great to go to a school like Queen's. I wish I was lucky enough to be a student. I couldn't afford it neither by money-wise or by able to get a visa as a refugee at that time. But what Queen's should give me is the education I need to become an innovator. That is the change we need now, not tomorrow, today. And I've just written an article for the leading UAE paper yesterday because I was asked how to prepare our generations for the future. One sentence: change the education system to produce innovators instead of job seekers. The world is different every day. In our organization, the only constant is change. And I know newcomers like Dr. Muntaha, who is a new member, a very welcome new member of a family, finds it difficult to cope with the change every day. And sometimes people come to me, or my colleagues come to me and say, but only 4 days ago we decided. I said, 4 days, that's too long. I should have changed that decision yesterday. 4 days is too long for any decision to stay, to remain right, because the world changes at such a speed that nothing good today is good for tomorrow. That's why I have this mission, and I'm serious. I'm talking to lawyers, starting by suing UNESCO, and I have a long career with UNESCO and all the UN system, that UNESCO is still talking about teaching and opening schools and providing schools for the unprivileged. The unprivileged are the privileged. Because I was unprivileged, I am privileged. I want this message to get through to our young generation. If you are unprivileged, you are lucky, because this makes you a better person. I was always unprivileged. I was always needing everything. I needed everything. When I went to school, when we became refugees, it was summer. When it became winter, I didn't have a jacket. My mother learned that a blanket can become a jacket. And that's the story behind my book, which I wrote, How Blankets Become Jackets. And believe me, a jacket made out of a blanket is much better than this jacket. A blanket keeps you much warmer. So I learned to be happy wearing a blanket instead of wearing a jacket. A decent, pleasant, nicely looked, expensive jacket. This is not expensive, but still. Anyway, so today I was asked to stay, and I was asked even by Loai not to speak more than 2 minutes, and I think I already spoke more than 2 minutes and a half. So I'm sure you are somebody is timing me, and it's already 12 minutes, correct? Additional handbook. So I time myself. I know how long I speak. Okay, so I want to close by saying that we're very proud of our association with Queen's University. And I want to assure you that we will provide every resource that we have in furthering our cooperation with you and in building a model partnership between us. I believe in partnerships, and I build partnerships all over the world. And I built so many partnerships under the umbrella of the United Nations and all the international organizations that I have been on their boards. Today is the beginning of our march together. I welcome you, and I offer a warm hand of welcome to you, and I will be hoping that we can show the world that our occupier, the Great Britain, who is the greatest imperialist country in the world, and who taught imperialism to the world. America is only a student of imperialism, and that's why still America is learning and trying to follow the steps, not very successfully, of Great Britain. Great Britain was a great empire, still is. It's not anymore an imperialist power, but it's a great empire. But even as an imperialist, Great Britain had one good contribution. During its occupation, it helped the process of education. We studied under British occupation, and we were supported in our education, unlike the neo-imperialist quasi-country called Israel, where education is prohibited. education is not allowed. My daughter once visited Palestine, and I don't believe in the existence of Israel. It's Palestine, under occupation. And they asked her, "What are you doing here?" She came under a foreign passport. She said, "I'm coming to study the process of education in Palestine." She said, "Why should you waste your time? Palestinians do not need education. They need to be good workers, laborers. The Palestinian laborer is an excellent laborer. You should concentrate on programs for making every Palestinian a laborer." Well, I am a laborer. I am a knowledge worker. If that policeman or customs or passport officer did not know that being a laborer is a great job, I say proudly that I am a worker. I am a knowledge worker. And that's what, when I do interviews and they ask me under what title they want to put me, I say I'm a knowledge worker. I work for knowledge and I work to disseminate knowledge. I work to learn and I work to produce knowledge. So we have to realize that in all cases, what we can learn from Queens would demonstrate that great countries like Britain offer their hand for progress in the world, and we, in reciprocity, say we recognize your leadership and we want to learn from you and work with you. And this worker is here to tell you I'm honored to be working with you. Thank you.
Please welcome with me Professor Margaret Topping, the Dean of Graduate School at Queen's University, and Miss Catherine Pollett, her assistant, to deliver the leadership workshop.
Gentlemen, can I first say just my warmest thanks to Dr. Talal, to Dr. Muntaha for inviting me and Catherine to be here with you today and to share some of our thinking around entrepreneurial leadership in the 21st century. It's a real pleasure and privilege, and can I say that I also welcome very much your very warm words about our future collaboration, and I'm looking forward to great things that we can do together. My background, I'm also a literature lover, because my background is French literature. And when you were talking about being a worker, Dr. Talal, I was thinking of a French writer, 17th century, who said, "Thinkers think and doers do. But unless the thinkers do and the doers think, progress will only ever be a word." And I think that's what we can do together, is thinking and doing. That's absolutely key to what we're doing. And I hope I can convince you that Queen's is one university to take off your list to be sued. Because we're trying to do something a little bit different and trying to produce innovators at the end of it. That's my challenge, though. I take it up. I wanted just to say a little bit about myself, first of all. It's not as good a story as Dr. Talal's. I said he's a hard act to follow, but he's also a fantastic act to follow, because in many ways what he says preempts so much of what we're going to talk about today, and it's wonderful to see that here, inspiring us all. So my background, I said, maybe not quite so exciting, but as Dr. Muntaha said, my background is, or my current role is as Dean of the Graduate School at Queen's University Belfast. And within that context, I've also increasingly become, in the last couple of years, involved in working in the Middle East. It's been the most exciting time of my career, and because of that, I have a new role, which is looking after how we in Queen's think about our collaborations with colleagues across this region. Before I say any more about my own journey and move into the context of the workshop, though, I wanted to share with you just a little bit of what Queen's is about and what Queen's Graduate School is about. And hopefully that will begin to respond to some of Dr. Talal's challenges about what we should be doing in university. So I have a very short video, and then we'll talk a little bit further. years ago, I was asked to set up a graduate school at Queen's. Now, this is not quite the same scale of ambition as what Dr. Muntaha is doing, which is setting up a university, but I was asked to set up a graduate school. And at that time, all we did was come up with a vision that really in many ways chimes with what Dr. Talal was saying. And that video was the realization of that vision at the time. I said, we want something that we can show to the world that tells everyone this is what we're about. And it's a different way of approaching what educational institutions do. So that was our vision. 3 years on, we've had the highs and lows. We've had the roller coasters that come with any leadership journey. But now we have the reality of what those students are doing. They're living that. They're going out. We're helping them to build their own businesses. We're helping them to undertake all sorts of innovation challenges that in part have economic outcomes, but also have social outcomes that are transforming the societies we work in. That's what we're all about, and that's going to feed into what I'm talking about today. I just wanted to tell you maybe a little bit about myself. It's perhaps a strange journey. It's been a geographical journey as well as an intellectual journey. So I started out in Northern Ireland, that's where I was born, but I spent quite a lot of time in my childhood in the United States. I then moved to Oxford, where I did my undergraduate degrees, my postgraduate degrees. In that time, moved to France, moved to Spain, spent various times in each of those countries, back to the US as well. And then when I finished my doctorate, I had my first job in Wales, another very small part of the United Kingdom, and was there for 7-8 years, and then found myself, quite by accident, not really by design, back in Northern Ireland and in Queen's, at a time when Queen's was really starting to change and transform and saying, time to do something differently. So it was a very exciting time to be part of that organisation. As you can see, that whole journey started from something very, very traditional study, French literature. I'm a Proustian, and I still have my love of literature, and I think it's the core to so much of our possibility and capability for creativity and innovation. But I started to become more interested in my research in issues of translation, migration, communication, intercultural contact, and realised we need to make a difference in what we're doing in universities. We can't just sit and talk to ourselves. That's great, it's very self-affirming, but it's not changing anything. So we wanted to move forward. How can we change things? At around the same time, I had the job of setting up the graduate school. So I was thinking about how do we make a difference. That allowed me to come into contact with business, with community leaders, with other universities, with policymakers. And what I've realised, and what I'm going to talk about today, is that it's only in that unique partnership between our university leaders, our business leaders, our community leaders, and our policymakers that we can really start to change things. We live too often in silos where we talk to people like us. We need to have those difficult conversations across sectors, across borders, across languages, generations, beliefs. Because what I've learned through working with business world and community and policymakers has been transformative for me. So what I'm now doing is spreading the word. And I have the very great pleasure and privilege of being able to get up in the morning and come and do things like this. And that's really what gets me up in the morning. Why I do what I do, it's about igniting people's imaginations. I want them to understand what's possible so that they can find the motivation. They can find the ability, the tools to innovate in ways that are going to allow them to make a change in the world. That's why I get out of bed in the morning. And in some ways this becomes more and more and more important for us because, as many will have come across before, we're living in what commentators now call a VUCA world. If you haven't come across the VUCA world before, this is the model. It's the idea of where we're living at the moment. It's volatile, it's uncertain, it's complex, it's ambiguous. I'm sure that was always the case, but we do now have Trump. We do now have Brexit in the UK context. We have absolute chaos and stupidity everywhere. No hiding my political views there. And so, for all the more reason, we need to be thinking how we do things differently and how we need to be different leaders in order to be able to help everyone, our teams, our colleagues, our students, our children, make some sort of sense of this. So there's a recognition, we start from the idea that this is the new normal. This is what we live in. And I think Dr. Talal summed that up very well. There are lots of other factors, I think, which have had an impact. I'm not going to break into song. I know it's tempting. I sort of want to. I think there are lots of other factors that have had an impact on us in terms of why we're living in this world and why we also need to start thinking differently about how we educate young people, how we lead young people, how we transform the future. Dr. Talal and Dr. Muntaha talked about technology. We were talking to Mr. Lloyd this morning also about the Singularity University. Technological change is happening so fast in the world in which we live that we simply don't know what the next 10, 15, 20 years are going to look like. We don't know whether any of us will be sitting in a physical environment like this. We could be linking in from all over the world. The jobs we do may not exist anymore. I could be on a beach somewhere, sipping cocktails. Can't be terrible. So technology is changing at such a rate that we really need to think differently about how we're educating, how we're learning, how we're leading. And the Singularity University that Dr. Lloyd was talking about earlier, very exciting idea, created at the think tank in the Silicon Valley outside San Francisco. And it's based on the idea that technology is growing so rapidly that at some point in the future we will reach the point of singularity. And singularity is the moment when machines and humans become as one. We were talking about it, Dr. Talal is very familiar with this. When he last read about it, the date that was being projected was 2050. Mr. Lloyd was saying that in fact now it's looking more like 2030.
It's because he's younger than me.
It's because he's younger, exactly. So things are changing. So when we come back to the thing of learning and teaching, how can we prepare young people? How can we prepare our teams in whatever work environment we're in to be ready for that? We can't possibly imagine what that's going to be like. There are also a few people in the room that I would put in this bracket. I'm afraid Dr. Talal, Dr. Muntaha, we're out of this. This is long gone. But a lot of you in the room I can see are millennials. So people who were born from about 1980 through to the early 2000s. And you're people who want something different. Partly I think because you have grown up with technology. These are some of the characteristics of the so-called millennial generation. They want to have flexibility. They want to be globally mobile. They want to move. They don't want to get a job aged 21 and stay there till they're 65. And as we said, that's not going to happen anyway. It's not going to be the world we live in. They want to make a difference. They have high expectations of their own lives. They want to go out and make the change that they want to see in the world. So how do we help them? Part of that, just to mention very briefly, another context, another factor in this, the idea of the gig economy. Whether you think it's a good thing or a bad thing, it's part of how we live. But it's also recognizing that people need to be adaptable, they need to be flexible, they need to be able to move jobs, move countries, change their focus, change their ideas. So again, how do we foster that? National strategies across the world are recognizing this. They're recognizing that we live in a VUCA world. They're recognizing that we need to do something differently. In the British context, we have an industrial strategy which puts at the top not building a building, all the infrastructure is there, but ideas. Ideas are what's going to transform our economy. In Northern Ireland, where we are, we again have a strategy. And Northern Ireland, very far away, much colder than here, much wetter, but very similar in terms of recognizing that our countries need to do something different if we are to grow our economies. And what we need to do is generate more businesses. We need SMEs, small, medium-sized businesses. We need to innovate. And so what our strategy in Northern Ireland is calling out is the need for international collaboration, actually having those conversations across borders. Being innovative. Collaborate. Recognizing that innovation is more than research and development. And that's our key message. We were talking about this at lunch. Innovation isn't just about a new product or a new design. It's a way of thinking. It's a mindset. It's the possibility, opening up endless possibilities and just running with it and see what happens. You're doing this in Jordan as well. I'm sure this will all be very familiar to you. I've been looking recently at your national strategy, your National Human Resource Development Strategy, which is around education for prosperity. And again, absolutely what's called out there is the need for innovation. A learning system that learns. It's so perfectly summed up in what you said. And everything in that, everything that flows from that, comes from a changed mindset. Access, quality, accountability, working across boundaries. And I was also very interested to see the Crown Prince Foundation, a major organisation in Jordan, which is also highlighting, I know this one is not very hard, easy to see, but highlighting again innovation and entrepreneurship. That's what our country needs to do. So against that backdrop, when we set up the graduate school, this is what we said we needed to do. We said, as I think Dr. Talal was suggesting also, we don't just need subject experts. We need people who can think. We need people who can innovate. We need people who can lead, who can communicate. And if we have all of that, then hopefully we'll be making them a little bit more future-proof. And when we think about thinkers, we can have very, very strong scholarly traditions in our schools, in our universities. But actually, if we don't know how to be reflective, if we don't know how to be critical, if we don't know how to be disruptive and say, no, hold on, we're not doing it that way anymore, then we're not really thinking. Innovation as well, as it suggests here, it's not just about product design. It's about being creative. It's about being business aware. It's about understanding how to use risk and optimize risk. Leading, again, it's not necessarily about being in the position that Dr. Talal is in. Every single person in this room is a leader, whether they're leading a project, leading a team, whatever it might be. And then the communication across all the very many ranges of media that we work in now. All of that is creating confidence, emotional intelligence, resilience, the ability to move forward. Just wanted to mention briefly the importance of that coming at a very early stage. What I was talking about in terms of my own journey, it has very much focused in the main on working with postgraduate students. But because of the work that we've been doing around that innovation, leadership, communication space, I've now been involved in rethinking some of the educational strategy in Northern Ireland and creating and introducing innovation at a very early stage, creating a kind of a learning environment which is about risk-taking, action-oriented, bringing in some of those sort of creativity skills. And what I'm really interested in now, and part of the work I'm going to be doing in Jordan, is thinking about how do we create the sort of innovation ecosystem which is driven by entrepreneurial leaders and which is bringing together business, policy, education and research. We can't do it in our silos. We need to bring them together, and in that space, interesting things happen.
And the policy, do you include government?
Yes. Oh, that's what I mean there, policymakers.
That's a better word than government. I like that.
I think, and that's key. And it's the hardest bit, I think. Because we're not going to change this until we change this. And so it goes on. So that's what we're trying to create in a local environment. I think that's also something that you are really striving for here, and I think it's the way forward, or where something interesting can really happen. So I'm just, because there are quite a lot of you in the room, we can't have too much jumping around and group work. But I thought I'd just get you thinking about this a little bit as we move into the context of the Open Leadership Workshop. Think about the whole notion of a vocal world. I'm not going to ask you necessarily to share this with us, but first task for you, a little bit of a job, is to spend just a couple of minutes, maybe about 2 minutes, thinking about what working in a vocal world looks like for you. What is it that makes your world volatile, uncertain? I've forgotten what the C is. Complex.
Constant. But I would change it.
You're going to change it?
I would change the arrangement of the words. I would call it VUCA.
And what would it be?
It becomes a vacuum. Vacuum.
Vacuum. And what would the end?
VACU.
Vacuum. That sounds better than VUCA.
It's a vacuum. Vacuum word.
What's the M for? What is the M?
It's the same four words, but
A different order.
different arrangement. The VUCA
Vacuum.
That,
Which sounds like a vacuum, which is also a bad thing.
exactly.
Okay, that's our first innovation of the day. Dr. Talal can officially patent that one, but that's his. I can't take any credit for that one. Okay, so take a little bit of time. This looks like something very different in all of the environments we work in. If you're a student, it looks different. If you're in a leadership role, it looks different. So spend 2 minutes just thinking about, number one, 3 factors that make your world into a VUCA world. And the other side of it is to suggest 3 approaches for dealing with that. Are there any attitudes, behaviours, what could we do differently in our own environments in order to be able to address that volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, or volatility, ambiguity, complexity, and uncertainty? Don't ask me to say that again. Okay. So 2 minutes, this is a little bit of work for you to do, 2 minutes, and Catherine will be counting. 3 things that make your life a VUCA world, 3 attitudes, behaviours, what could you do to change it? Your world, a VUCA world.
First, I may suggest something, that they write down their ideas so they didn't get benefit of,
Not changing your ideas.
Don't change your idea after His Excellency says.
Sorry, should I speak or not?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I have your permission. One is your own mindset. It starts with you. The first approach should be a self-decision approach. Do you want to change first? Because the most difficult problem in this world is inside us. We are used to doing things and living with things as they are. The will to change within you, inside you, is the first approach I would need. You must decide for yourself that you want to change. Before you change your environment, you need to decide in yourself that you want to change. Once you take that decision, you need to have a process for the change. How do you implement the change? Most people would like change and they would like to see change, but they stop at the point of willing or agreeing or wanting. So the next step is to have an action plan for making the change happen. So you need to decide how and what action plan you need to implement. Number 3, and this is me, I think everything in life is a decision. No environmental, no financial, no social, anything can stop you from making the change if you believe that you can do it. So you must have the confidence in yourself that you're going to make this change happen. I don't know what Brighton believes, but I believe that it all goes around you. It is not something you can borrow as a tool, nor something that you can get as help, nor something outside you that you need to motivate. It all starts from inside me, and it goes from outside me to the whole world. I am the center of the world. I can change the world, and if I decide that, and I'm able to do it, I have done. I can tell you a lot of stories, if you want, how I changed the world.
Thank you. I realise that's a hard act to follow. Is anyone willing to? Yes? But thank you.
3 things I thought of. One is collaboration. It is crowdsourcing. It is welfare together. This is how I present them. And it is democracy. It's us together, the people.
Yes.
No longer is it a dictatorship and one rule. It is people make own destination, not relying on governments, on other people to feed them. They've got to run around and do it. That was number 2.
Yeah.
And the third one is being out of the box. And you've got to think your own mindset as Dr. Talal Abu-Ghazaleh. One thing I have reservation about Talal Abu-Ghazaleh's comment was everything is a decision. Talal Abu-Ghazaleh, Dr. Talal, I have one comment. You always say it, if I listen to you on the radio, you say everything is a decision. I would change it if you don't mind. I would say everything is a choice. And a decision is one of the choices. You cannot decide everything. So you have all the choices, the spectrum of it, and you choose one of them. And that's your decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, just thinking about how we do things in a more democratic, non-hierarchical way, and also outside the box. Anyway, fantastic. Thank you very much.
I'm going to list the 3 beliefs. If each one of us have them, maybe we're going to change the world.
Yeah.
The first one is it's never too late to change. If we have this belief, we can take the right decision always and learn from our mistakes or learn from different lessons around us. Second one is adaptation. We need to be flexible and we can adapt quickly with everything, all the changes around us, so we can change our plan. If I set plan A, anything that change, I have to adapt and I have another plan directly to move on. And the last one, to believe that I'm always a learner. I will never stop to be a learner.
Sorry, I missed your last word there.
Learner.
Okay. Yes.
I have to believe that I'm always a learner and learn from everything around me.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
We should test some government employee. That's my ground. We should work together as one team. Unfortunately, at the same government here, we don't work at the same team. Second thing, we should have most pushing to knowledge share, because everyone knows something and they just keep it to him and they didn't share it with others. Last thing, we should work as a win-win. Or we should win, not just when you lose. That's very
Wonderful. Thank you very much. To create that culture in your environment, which allows people to think that it is okay to lose. Thank you. Maybe time for just one more. Who was? I think this chap is in it first.
Control when he can excel at something, and this is a prerequisite to innovation. So if you want to innovate first to modify something successfully, like to meet someone's needs, you have to innovate, and then after that, the next one is to or to create something new, or to come up with some patent, or this is a later stage, I think. So you have to have a good quality, or develop your own quality, develop your own value, and then develop your innovation, and then you will go for the patent and creation.
Yes. Perfect segue into what I'm going to talk about next, which is that sense of, actually, how do you find out what's your why? Why do you do this? Because actually that surely is the way that we can begin to change the world. We've got to really understand why we're doing it, what we're doing it for. And just to, we'll come back to the idea of the VUCA world, vacuum world, a number of times, but it's very interesting. Everything I think that was said in this room, because they're all just equally important insights. This is commonly what's said in terms of responses to these different aspects. Someone talked about agility. I think the lady down here talked about the agility. You've got to be flexible. You've got to adapt. Absolutely. We're in a world now where we can't do the same as we always did. The vision and coming out, getting a sense about where you are going. Why are we doing this? So everything changes around you, but if you know what you're trying to do and why, you can keep going, and so on. And actually, the gentleman here at the front who was talking about the values, there's something so important here about human values and empathy, and why you're doing what you're doing at the bottom. So, on that note, let's move us towards the idea of finding your why. I think what everyone has said here reflects very clearly the idea we all want things to change, we all see what the problems are, but then the next step is recognizing, okay, we're going to have to do something about that. Because if we keep doing it the same way, if we don't change, then nothing will change with us. But as someone said, I can't remember who it was, everyone wants change. Who wants change? Yeah, we want the world to change, we want a better world. Who wants to change? Not so sure. And that's the real skill, the real challenge for us as we work across sectors in this innovation ecosystem. How do we create cultures where people genuinely feel that it is okay to change, and that it's not about risk, and it's not about being punitive? And this is one of the key kind of distinctions when people talk about entrepreneurial leadership. Now, I'm not a fan of very tight definitions, because of course there's traditional corporate leadership and entrepreneurial leadership are not two separate things. Dr. Talal has given us a vision, an incredibly entrepreneurial vision of everything that he has done throughout his career. So it's not a 21st century phenomenon. But I think there is an increased focus on it amongst commentators and researchers in this area because of recognising how everything is so much more complex and volatile. So I'm going to go with an easy distinction, but recognise that it is too sharp a distinction. But the typical sort of sense of the traditional corporate leadership is that the emphasis is on processes, systems, risk minimisation. In our university, our chief executive officer, who's recently retired, in some ways was a very strong, very, very powerful leader, but everything he did was about risk minimisation, so nothing ever changed. We're entering a new time when it's all very exciting. The idea of the entrepreneurial leadership, and it picks up on so many of the points you were making about your responses to the book world, is much more about empathy, understanding the impact we're having on the other. We had a lovely workshop yesterday with students, I see them here, on design thinking. We started with the idea that if you're going to innovate, you've got to put yourself in the other person's shoes. You've got to empathise. Values, the gentleman here talked about values. Okay, let's try and think about risk differently. When we talk about risk optimisation, it doesn't mean saying, risk is great, yeah, let's just do it. You have to manage it, but you can look at it differently. And a way that is creative and which leads to something other than this sort of just no. Creating a culture of possibility. A culture where creativity and innovation are possible. And I say those recognising that those are very fine words. I can stand up here and say them, but it's very, very, very difficult to make that happen on the ground in your team, in your leadership environment. We'll talk a little bit about how you might do that. So I'm going to start with the first one, which is the idea of how do we create leaders grounded in empathy, a leadership grounded in empathy and human values. And I wanted to introduce you to a concept called Finding Your Why. Has anyone come across the book? I have a copy of it here somewhere, by Simon Sinek, which is called Start With Why, and then his new book, Find Your Why. Yes, it's familiar. You're familiar. Have you tried the process? Absolutely. Did you find it transformative?
Exactly.
Tell us something. If we can get a wait till we get a mic.
Especially when looking about your values,
Yeah.
when values are driving your actions, and drilling to your most important values of your why. Why are you doing this? Are you doing this to eradicate poverty, or are you doing this to have a day job? So it's so very enlightening, clear, targets your efforts into the future where you need to be putting all your enthusiasm in the most correct way.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I'll not ask you to share your why unless you want to. But Simon Sinek argues, and my lovely assistant is showing you the book. Happy to pass it around if anyone wants to have a look at it. It's very, very exciting. So what Simon Sinek argues is that, well, put yourself in a position when you arrive today, hopefully you'll have chatted to people you haven't met before. If you introduce yourself to them, what are you going to say? Hello, my name's Margaret Topping. What's the next thing that you tell them?
Why you are here?
Why? Oh, that's good. Who said that? Most people don't. What do most people tell you? You meet someone new? What do you tell them?
What do you do?
What do you do? Exactly. And that's what we tend to go for. When we start talking about ourselves, what our place in the world, we immediately tell people what we do. We might push it a little bit further. So if someone said to me, I said, I'm an academic, I could maybe tell you a little bit more different about how I try to do that a little bit differently. So that might be a little bit about my how, but rarely do we get to our why. And that's not just in casual conversations when we are meeting new people, but it's also in our work environments. When we get up every day, as our colleague at the back was saying, it's the difference between getting up in the morning and thinking, well, I have to go to work because I have to pay my bills, versus I'm getting up in the morning because I want to be fulfilled. And I know why I'm doing it, and I know what my organisation's reason is for doing it. Here's a little story to tell you how some of this works. So Simon Sinek, the author of the book that you saw, he talks about how he gets on a plane. We've all been in that. Anyone who travels a lot, you get on a plane, a stranger sits beside you, and you think, well, I'm going to start talking. Am I in the mood to talk? Well, I have to have a whole conversation. He describes getting onto a plane and speaking to someone called Steve. Steve gets on, sits beside Simon Sinek, and talks at great length about his 23-year career making and selling steel, hot stuff. So this is how the conversation goes. So Simon talks for a very long time about steel, very passionate about his steel. Steve talks about it. Simon then says, okay, I get that the steel you sell is very pure. I get that it allows for lighter components, which make machines more efficient. But so what? The so what question is so powerful in any environment to get people to push further. And they're thinking, so Steve is, well, we're very troubled by that. Why? What do you do this for? So what? What's the point? Not so much material needs to be used. And Simon Sinek pushes and pushes. But what difference does that make? Saving fuel, reducing pollution is great. But surely there's something more at stake, something you truly believe in, something that really makes you get out of bed in the morning. And what he ends up, this is a shortened version of what he ends up with this conversation, is Steve saying, yeah, I get it, I know what my why is. I want to keep the planet healthy for my children and for future generations. And one way to be able to do that is to be more responsible in the way that we use our resources. So the steel that he is producing is lighter. It means airplanes can be lighter. It means cars can be lighter. They can use less fuel, and so on. For Simon Sinek, everyone has a why, but it's quite a process of discovery to find it. And he also says that everyone has the right to find their why and then to have a fulfilled professional and personal life. He recognises, and I think from our colleague at the back, this can be really transformative. This is the difference between dragging yourself out of bed because you have to pay your bills, to actually feeling, I found my reason for being in the world. Now this could be a really personal, finding your why, but it's also something that we can do at the level of teams and organisations. And there is a very interesting process that you can go through in order to help discover your why as an organisation. If any of you are interested in how this works, obviously just chat to me at the end, but that's like a whole day's work where you can sit with your team or with even a bigger organisation and think about finding your why. And let's face it, if everyone in the team, everyone in the organisation knows why we do this, people in the organisation might do slightly different things, they might have slightly different what's, but if they all know their why, then everyone's passionate, everyone's pulling in the same direction. So as Simon Sinek tells us, every organisation on the planet knows their what. They all know what they do. We sell steel. We make cars, whatever. Some organisations know how they do it. So they can say, well, what we do that's different from the other car makers is such and such. But very few organisations know why they do what they do. And why is not about making money. It's not about profit. That's a result. Why is the purpose? It's the thing that drives you. Sorry. The cause, exactly. And that's a really important point to make because as Sinek tells us also, the why is not, it's not your aspiration, it's not saying this is what we want to be, it's saying this is what we are. And we need to dig really deep. I'm thinking kind of what Dr. Talal said, it's coming from inside. You've got to dig really deep and understand why you are doing what you are doing. So it's not about saying this is where we want to be, it's what we are, what we do. Fascinating process, which I said, I'm very happy to talk about how that all works. But you can do it as an individual, but you can also do it as a team, and you can also do it as a whole organisation. It's about finding the reality of what you do and why you do it, not about an aspiration. It's also based on going back, origin stories, digging back into your mind and saying, okay, as an individual, what was the moment when I felt very fulfilled as a child? In an organisational context, it might be, what was the moment that we felt really proud as a team? You ask these very, very, very specific questions. Out of that, themes start to emerge, and from there, you start to build your why statement. I mentioned at the start that this is why I get out of bed in the morning. This is my why statement. To ignite people's imaginations about what's possible, so they can find the motivation and the ability to innovate in ways that allow them to make a change in their world. And what's really crucial about a why statement also, it's not just about your work, it's wherever you are. It's in your family, it's in your social environment, it's the thing that doesn't change that defines you. So you think, well, how does that work in an organisation? An organisation has a why. Now, if we have, I think probably Dr. Talal could tell us the why for his organisation. If you have a founder there, they can often tell you what they think the why is. But if you don't feel you know that, if you don't have access to a founder, you can do a workshop which allows you, again, to dig deep. And it's not about getting the bosses in the room, it's about getting everyone in the room. From the cleaners, from the catering staff, right up to the CEO. Taking an all-hierarchical approach and going through this process of digging deep to find your why as an organisation. There's a very nice example in Simon Sinek's book, which is about a very famous coffee making company, coffee machine making company. And they decided they needed to do this. They brought him in. And they spent a very long time. They were talking about, he asked them to think about what the moments we were proud, all of that. All of the people came up with their memories of times when the company felt really good. And they ended up coming up with a why. What they realised the common themes were, it was about coffee as a symbol of something that connects people. And their why statement came about, we make our coffee machines in order to connect people across the world and so on. So again, something really fundamental that lots of people can buy into. So each part of the organisation could have a slightly different why, but it's all linking into that big one. Why do we do this? Well, I think Simon Sinek said it very nicely. If you hire people just because they can do a job, they'll work for your money. But if you hire people who believe what you believe, they'll work for you with blood and sweat and tears. So one reason to do it is to think about the ways in which you get an enormous amount of commitment from the people around you. Now this is my checking and reality check with you. Is there anyone in the room who's sitting thinking, really? Why should I care? In my organisation, I can say to people, it's your job, do it. I don't care, as long as it gets done. Is anyone feeling like, yeah, come on, this is all a bit soft? Yes, thank you for being honest. We've got someone in the room who's saying, yeah, this just feels a little bit fuzzy. Okay, so I'm going to be checking in with you every so often, particularly you, to see if we can get beyond it. Okay, let me give you some concrete examples of where this goes beyond your employees feeling good about what they do. So I'm not sure how much publicity this would have got here, but we probably will recognise the Volkswagen brand. In the past year, in different parts of Europe, I'm not sure how much it was visible here, but Volkswagen, it's that why their whole purpose is around solidity, reliability, trustworthiness, all of that. That's what their brand is built on. It came out in a series of scandals last year that they were fixing the emissions tests in cars, so some of you have heard of this, to make it seem as if their emissions were lower than what they actually were, that they were less polluting than in fact they were. People didn't buy the cars because of the emissions levels. They bought them because Volkswagen is predicted, it's trustworthy, it's reliable, it's a strong brand. They lost a huge amount of money. Another example, Apple. How many people in the room have got an Apple device? Lots and lots and lots and lots. Apple, great device. Anything you hate about your Apple, your iPhone? Battery power, battery length? What's someone say there?
Charger.
You need to charge it.
The charger.
The charger, you hate your charger. And is it just the shape of the charger or just having to use it all the time?
The original.
You use it all the time. My thing with Apple, and lots of people's issues with Apple, is that they don't have a long battery life. So you're charging it every night.
And the storage.
And storage. But do we change? No. Because we buy the Apple concept.
I did change.
You did change?
Yeah.
Where did you go to?
Huawei.
Okay, you're like spoiling. You're spoiling the whole thing.
Two of them, not one of them.
Most people don't. Most people don't. And why don't they? Because they're buying into that sort of concept. You know, this is very young Steve Jobs. His whole ethos was around thinking differently. He talks about, he talked about making a dent in the universe. We like that idea. We want to be part of that concept. We like the idea that that's a driver for us as well. And so Apple becomes synonymous with that. So even though we may not feel that it's perhaps this other product may be better, I'll give you 5 minutes to sell it to everybody at the end. People stay with Apple. My point here is, for the cynics in the room, that this is not just about emotional fuzziness with your employees, with your team. It's actually this hardcore market research that shows that if you've got that wine, it's not just branding. I mean, some of Steve Jobs, it is a whole philosophy that there are positive economic impacts of having that kind of strong messaging, because people want to be part of it. They want to be part of your why. And those were two examples where, in the case of Volkswagen, trust, all of that, that was what they were associated with. That was lost. They lost massive sales. In this case, we stay with Apple. We stay with them because we buy the concept. And this is something I sort of sum up on that. That people don't entirely buy what you do when faced with a range of choices of products. They buy why you do it. And what you do simply proves what you believe. Okay, cynic, where's my cynical friend? Yeah, anyone want to join the cynical club? Anyone thinking, oh come on, this is so fuzzy? You're on your own. Okay, my job is to convert you this afternoon. Okay, let me give you a good example of think about those the why statements that I gave you. They're about, in my case, I try to ignite people's excitement in order that they can do something different in the world. Why statements, your why discovery process is all about what you do in order to have an impact on others. So it's about shifting the focus away from yourself and what you think you need in the world to how you're impacting others. It's about shifting, someone talked about empathy earlier. Okay, great example, a man called Doug Dietz, who worked for General Electric for healthcare in the US, and he was a designer of MRI scanners. Probably plenty of people in the room have had the experience of having to have an MRI scan. Yeah, some people have had this. For those of you who've done it, it's not pleasant. You're on this little belt, you get moved into this kind of tunnel, you have to lie very, very still. It's very, very noisy. And it's not, you don't feel relaxed. It's not a positive experience. So Doug Dietz had been a leading designer and had really rethought the whole formulation of the MRI scanner. Was up for an award, a design award, the sort of Oscars of design. And so was asked, would he like to come to a hospital and see how some of this works in practice. So he came along and he was chatting to nurse doctors, saying, yeah, I designed this, getting an award on it. And they said, okay, that's great. Well, you can only see the use. If you could just sort of step outside into the corridor for a second, we have the patient coming in, and we probably need to sedate them. So he goes out into the corridor and sees a young girl coming towards him with her parents. And the child is anxious, distressed. She starts to cry. The father, he can hear the father saying to her, Mom, we know, we've talked about this. You know, you need to be brave, this needs to happen. And she's getting more and more anxious and uptight about the experience of having to have the MRI scan. And Doug Dietz, the designer, is horrified. Horrified because he's got this beautiful design, but he never thought about what it would be like for the end user, particularly for a child. And what he understood then as he spoke to the nurses there, they said, okay, we're going to have to wait a moment because the child is too distressed. She'll need to be sedated. So we need to see if there's anesthesiologist available, because they can't administer sedation, they need another person to do that. So they call up, I know there's no one available, so they have to say, okay, we're going to have to reschedule, we're going to have to go home. Apparently in 80% of cases with child MRI scans, the child needs to be sedated because it's so stressful for them. Doug Dietz was horrified at this. He went back to GE Healthcare and he said, we've got to do something about this. They said, why don't we do something about it? This is great, you're getting an award, it's fabulous. And he pushed and pushed and pushed, and eventually totally redesigned the MRI scanner. Has anyone come across this story before? It's very, very powerful, I think. And one of them, the fun famous one, is the power chip. The other one, which I particularly like, is the whole space adventure. And this is not just cosmetic. The technicians who are operating the MRI scanners, from the moment the child arrives, they're saying, okay, we're going on a big trip now. And I'm operating, they're the kind of rocket operator. So the child goes in there and the technician will be speaking to them and saying, okay, now we're going to be taking off or we're going into orbit now. It's a very, very important point. It's going to be noisy and you've got to lie very still, but it's all a storytelling approach. And it's transformed the experience for young children. And he went back and had this experience again and saw children coming out and saying, can we come again tomorrow? Now there were extra costs associated with this, but it has again transformed for the paediatric side. So again, I'm coming back to my cynical pal. Think about the financial implications of sedating 80% of paediatric patients. Not knowing in advance whether you're going to have to or not, so not knowing if you need an anesthesiologist, the cost of that person coming down, the cost when that person isn't available, so you have to reschedule, and so it goes on. What they got here through investment that involved thinking about the end user, pushing towards empathy and values, was something very, very different. Now I'm just going to do a little bit, we're going to have a break very shortly, but I wanted to move on to the second part. We just thought a little bit there about human values and empathy and how as leaders we bring that into play, how we maybe move our thinking away from the product and towards the end user. The second characteristic that we'd identified with our entrepreneurial leaders was this idea that instead of being risk minimizers, they're risk optimizers. Let's just talk a little tiny bit about risk and then we'll have a break. Again, thinking for you, a little bit of kind of feedback. Question is, and this is a very subjective scale, I'm saying 1 to 10. I will give you an internet address for a tool that you can use which is much more developed, and you can use that for free, and it helps you diagnose how much of a risk taker you are. But just start at a very subjective level. How much of a risk taker do you think you are? And what I suggest, again, we're not going to ask you to share this unless you'd like to. But first of all, where would you position yourself on a scale of 1 to 10? So this is a very blunt instrument. Start with that, and then think, what would your colleagues say? What would your friends say? Again, take 2 minutes, put yourself into your position, think about how much of a risk taker am I on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being very, very open to taking risk, and 1 being very, very risk averse. 2 minutes. Had anyone put themselves at a really extreme end of the scale? Has anyone put themselves as a 1 or 2 in terms of their own sense of risk aversion? Anyone put them? Oh, you have put yourself at 1 or 2? Yeah?
No, not 1 and 2, 9.
Oh, you put yourself at 9, okay. So did anyone put themselves on risk averse? Was there anyone who was a 3 or a 4? Put yourself around 3, 4? 4? 5? 6? 5, 6, okay. 7? 8? 9?
Where are you?
I'm just counting in Sesame Street. Okay, what I can see looking around here is that most people put themselves at the higher end. Sorry, go ahead.
I guess from the high heels, I think you can tell easily that whether you got 0 risk or high risk.
Exactly. I think it's just an interesting to reflect on how you see yourself. And that's more than this is not scientific at all. It's more about thinking, how do you see yourself? How do you think your colleagues, how do you think your team members would see you? If you see yourself as an 8 or a 9, that you're quite open to risk, do you think the people who work for you would agree with that? Might they put you lower?
Yes, I think they think that.
You are more risk averse than you think you are?
No, they think and I'm risky, like,
Ridiculous.
yes.
Okay. Someone behind you was going to tell us?
Yeah, I think my colleagues think that I'm risk more than 7, I'm 9 or 10. That's
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
Scale, yeah.
I think it's age related. Very much so.
But I think I'm 7.
The older you go, you take risks a bit more caution because you may fall off the cliff.
That's an interest. I'm not sure I agree.
Well,
Me too.
I'm not that balanced.
I'm the opposite.
Yes, sure it does.
I'm in the
You're not my age.
Why gender? Oh, that's a big one. Okay, there are lots of people that want to. Okay. What should gender be a variable in terms of whether you're more willing to less willing to take risk?
Well, because
Forget about being a mother.
no, forget about being a mother. Until this time, our current time, women are viewed as being subordinates to men. True. And being reviewed as a weak society members, and being viewed as somebody who needs to be protected.
and that doesn't go hand in hand with taking risks. That's why.
Entrepreneurs, it says that especially in some area, in most area, but especially in Jordan, it's only 3 out of 3 women comparing with 10 for entrepreneurs. And the degree goes down from the last 2 years.
That's true.
This means they are not willing to start a new business or working as their own business.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the case. The statistics would say.
Same are for the senior regarding the age. I see in age when you have like almost 40 or above 40, you should be more willing to take risk because you almost done the most basic thing in life, and it's time to give. It's time to do whatever you do to give people the whole experience you have, and you are still gaining. This is my idea.
That's really interesting. I could read what the connection is between age and gender. Actually, it's in the two are in place. Because actually, I feel reverse. I think whatever. What I think. Whereas we could talk about this one all day. It's really interesting. Maybe one other couple. Did you want to say something?
A woman, a
Okay, good.
skating board. Just give any woman a skating board and ask her to go and skate the street. And you will. All right. You might be.
You're on very, very shaky ground.
Yeah.
Lots of men learn this too.
I'm sorry, I know that the
Go ahead.
is full of women, but
I think we're going to stop the subject.
taking a risk, I mean, is actually, like what like motivates people to go and, for example, men go for wars. I mean, wars, you lose your life.
Well, lots of women go to war now, isn't it?
All right.
We are definitely.
The woman in the picture actually is taking a lot of risk. It's a lot big, probably more than a woman jumping from a parachute. How many women do that?
I swear to God.
Can I just suggest something? Do you want to say something? And then we'll lay down one challenge to our colleague here, and then we'll move on.
Sure. Well, maybe the prototype or the stereotyping about women is what categorizing the way that women think about themselves. Actually, sorry.
As mothers?
Okay, so I was pregnant and I started a company. While being pregnant, I resigned from my job, even that I had a promotion coming soon. But I believed in the why, and it was a very high-risk pregnancy that I was advised by the doctor not to move. But I used to go to Mafraq, to Irbil, just to study the people that and the cases to implement the projects on, because I believed in the why. I started the NGO along with my partner, co-founder, in the most risky part of my life. I've got a very, very, very big project in the time of delivery. So I was at the hospital with the C-section, after C-section, and I had to continue with the proposal and everything. So it's all about believing really the why gets you wake up every day and gets you really take decisions and gets you get going and gets you to actually figure out solutions for whatever problem that you're going to face, whether I'm going to put my son, or because he was really young, there's no nursery to take this young age child, my parents aren't here, and it's like a whole situation. So believing in the why creates you solutions if you're solution oriented. It's not about being a female or male. Everyone has a power. It's only about believing in yourself and the why. That's all.
Thank you.
I agree with that.
Girl power. And my challenge to you, and not in a negative way, is to think about, when we're thinking about how we build our teams, and we're thinking how we go about, and we're going to come back to that after the break, problem solving, creativity. I think it's really important for us, and I need to do it myself all the time because I have my own assumptions, rethinking your assumptions about what you think women bring to the team or what they don't. And that'll be my challenge, not just to you, because the gender one is one that's come up here, but we all need to think about what our assumptions are in terms of what different team members can and can't do and what they bring to the table. Interesting one. Thank you. Right, okay. let's just move on very, very quickly, a couple of slides. I said this is a very blunt instrument to say on a scale of 1 to 10. If you're interested in thinking about, how can we have a more evidence-based approach to understanding my own level of risk aversion, this is quite a nice, there are lots of tools out there, but this is one that's free, and you can do it online. It's 20 questions that range not just from work environments, from all sorts of environments, everything from the sorts of things that you wear to what you do in your work environment. It's just quite a nice one. You submit it and I'll give you a little bit of feedback on it if you're interested in that. Catherine, how are we for time?
It is 3:45.
I'd like you to take 2 minutes, and then we're going to wrap up for the break, to think about 2 questions. The first one is, what are the key elements of risk for your organisation? Now, maybe that's the same as every organisation. So risk, reputational damage, financial insolvability, all of that. What are the key? That's the first one, and that's probably quite common across lots of sectors. This is the question where I really want you to dig down a little bit before we go on our break, which is to think about what are the barriers to staff in your organisation taking risks. Is there a culture that actually allows this? And so the question is, for ourselves, and the challenge of our break is, be honest with ourselves. We all love to talk that we're risk takers. Most people put themselves further up the scale. We like that narrative. But the reality is that most big organisations in particular are not risk taking. And we can talk about the narrative of, we take risks, we allow failure. Other places don't, in reality. And so people are afraid to do that. So my challenge to myself and my challenge to anyone who is leading in any context is think about the narrative you're putting out there, but are you really allowing your teams to develop their own entrepreneurial leadership? And the real role of leadership is to generate the next generation of leaders. Are you allowing people to do that? And with that is, are you actually allowing the possibility of failure? Thank you.